Hello, hello. You can hear me okay? Thanks, Abigail. There's still two more people we're waiting on for this, so I don't want to jump in immediately, but I do want to say, how are you? Yes, sleepy and on the couch.
Yeah, sleepy and okay. Yeah, had a quick phone call with a friend and she was like, I'm sorry, I had drinks with people after work and blah blah. It was like nice to receive some of that like excited energy. And I was like waking up from like listening to the news and I was like, oh.
Oh,
I was like, okay.
yeah, that's amazing. Wild. There is a lot of news always. It's a lot to absorb and different energies. Hi, Oliver. Or is it Olivier? Yeah.
Yeah, Olivier, nice to meet you, Georgia.
Yeah. Hi. Hi, people at the table. Hello. Happy to see everyone. That's really sweet. Yeah, we have only a small number of participants today, based on the very little promotion I did for this. So that's fair. I think we're just gonna have a nice time talking about my particular strange way of working with the chaos that gets produced from the chaos document I was talking about last time. Um, and you guys will be, I mean, I've taught this before, but I still feel like I'm trying to sort of hone like something that makes a lot of sense to me. How can I bring that to people who think totally differently? And I would love your feedback on like how I present this and whether or not it kind of clicks. So I'm actually good with a small group for that reason, because if it means that I can get a little bit more like explicit feedback about how things are working or not working, that's super helpful. But also no pressure. Like, please finish your food, Olivier. Don't feel like you have to talk to me if you're, engaged in dinner time. It's very sweet to see your family there. Um, yeah. But I am going to give it another minute just in case there's Jen and there's one more person. Oh, there's Jen. Yep. I'm just making sure people get in as they arrive. There's one other person who signed up that I hope is going to be here, but I did switch the date. Last time I had a family situation that I was just like, I can't teach a class after this. It's just a bad idea. Hi, Jen.
Hi there. Sorry I'm late. I'm here though.
You're just barely late. Honestly, I wouldn't even consider it 5 minutes after.
Good.
Totally fine. Yeah, and we're just settling in. I was just explaining we're going to have a small group tonight, partly because of my date shift. Thanks for accommodating everyone. Last week, it was a bit much, and part of why I teach from home is so that I can do that, just to say like, sometimes I need a lot of rest unexpectedly. So there we go. But I mean, since there's only one person we're waiting for and they might not be coming because of the date change, maybe we can kind of get going. So I know Olivia was here last time and Abigail was too. Jen, I don't know if you got a chance to see the video from last time. If not, it's totally fine.
Sorry.
No, really, it's totally fine. I just wanted to check in because it just gives me an idea of what I might need to say, to sort of recap or slightly catch you up. Actually, there's a recording from last time that I just like made available on YouTube in case anybody wanted to watch that before coming in. So I'm going to drop that in the chat. Jen, you can look at that anytime. Because I think it's a good sort of starting point as far as just the easing into like the things that I actually think about before I make a comic, before I even have like all of the parts that I want to stitch together in the form of a comic. I think it boils down to, I find it very, very important to know what I'm going to say, because comics are beautiful and they're lyrical and rhythmic and all of these things. But for me, if they're not communicating clearly, then that's often because like there's just not been enough either gestation of the idea, or maybe there's not like a clear vision of what's being said. There's just a bit more of a scattered idea of what's being said. So I always, when I mentor and when I teach people, I'm like, once you figure out exactly what you're trying to say here, even if what you're trying to do is just ask questions, then the rest of it all it needs to do is serve what you're trying to say. So it helps make decisions because you stop being like, well, would people enjoy this? Is this the most interesting option? It's like, doesn't matter. What matters is, does it say what you want it to say? Does it serve what you want to say? So that's a lot of what I was talking about last time. And another piece to it was like, you might have a clear vision of what you're trying to say and then need to figure out in what method, like what tone do you want to communicate this? Do you want to use a genre? Because that's one thing that can give you a lot of guidance. If you're looking for an external structure, there are references, there are sort of touch points for every genre that people will expect and that you might draw inspiration from. But then more than genre, because lots of things can cross genres a lot, is like, what is the tone of what you're trying to say? As in, what's the like overall tone of how you'd like to communicate? We did a little brainstorming together around different genres and then different tones and like different central subjects. Because when I'm talking about knowing what you want to say, knowing what your central subjects are is a big part of that. So if you had, I think we had a couple of examples of like, you know, someone writing a story about trauma, but writing it with like a really happy tone, like a really joyful tone. And then it's like, okay, how does the story get told that way? And does that inspire you? Is that exciting? Would you want to read a story that's about trauma, but is super happy in tone? And how would that feel? Like, you can explore all the consequences of that matching up. And that becomes kind of like a baseline for you to twist and play with as you go. It's not like you're going to maintain the exact same thing you started with perfectly all the way through. It's just like, if this is where we're starting, then when we make a change from that place, it's going to feel really dynamic and dramatic, and it's going to have tension in it. Like, I'm probably going to say the word tension a lot today. Tension, tension, tension. Anyway, that's like the fastest recap I can offer you for the first session. And there's a couple little exercises we did, but like I said, they're more kind of brainstorming, nothing super time intensive. Lots of just like checking in, chatting about stuff, throwing ideas around. So where I landed last time, the sort of end of that initial presentation of the process I go through in making a comic, was that once I know what I'm trying to say, then there's the fun part of like, what's the story going to be that communicates that? And that takes me a lot of time to sort out. In the case of memoir, it's not as time intensive because it's more like just remembering things and trying to draw on current experience if it supports what I'm trying to say in the story. And remembering is very different than creating, even though there's a shared aspect. So now, like, I'm doing this very big fiction work, and knowing that it was going to be big, or that I really wanted to tackle details, I wanted to go into nuances with the story, I just had a lot of different ideas and needed somewhere to put them outside of my head. That's my main kind of, I think that's my main like creative process, actually, is just get it out of the head as quickly as possible. But I can't hope to organize it or even maybe understand where it's going until it is out. So I basically have this document. I have a Google document right now that is what I call my chaos document, where every thought I have that's related to the work in any way goes into that document. It's just like a pile of notes. I believe I showed some of it in the last class, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to show it again, because it's just, even trying to show it to someone else, I'm like, this must be a lot for you to just take in the moment. And for me to scroll through, it's just like pages and pages and pages. But really, like, I just dump things there so that I don't feel like I have to sit down and generate everything just from the majesty of my brain. I have this location where anytime a thought comes up, I know where it goes so that it doesn't get lost, but it's just collecting. I'm collecting ideas, I'm collecting experiences, maybe even just visuals. Like, if I'm moving through my life with these receptors on, like, I move through my life going, I know I'm in the midst of writing something, there's a story I really care about, so I'm kind of looking for things that could help all the time. And then when I see one, it's like, oh, look that, put it in the document, and then move on. Like, I don't tend to write until I have that like hefty pile of stuff. But here's where I wanted to start today, is what do you do with that? When you have just like a pile of stuff, what do you do? And of course, this is about my process, so I'm going to keep talking about what I do. And there's one particular thing that I've learned that I do. I used to do it just in my head. And now that I've been teaching longer, I've been trying to find better ways to describe small process in the larger process, because like, frankly, it's actually, yeah, it's a very small part of the whole piece, but it is also, for me, it's the organizing. Like, this method that I want to share with you is super simple. It's really like, I mean, it's simple in a way, but I have a feeling that for different brains, it might feel harder. But for me, like, moving from a bunch of absolute chaos into having a structure of how the story is going to go, it wouldn't happen without this piece. That's why I really want to share it. I have no idea how I would organize myself without thinking about it in this particular way. So that's what we're going to do a little bit of today. So first things first, I want to give you like at least just, let's say, like 3 sort of action items that you would do, that I do, that you could do if you wanted to, which is to say, I only concretely approach small numbers of pages at one time. Like, having that big chaos document, I mean, everything that's going to go in there, it's like oh boy, it's like probably a 600 to 800 pages of work that's going to be finalized from this chaos document. Like, it's going to be 3 books that are each about 200 pages long, maybe more. Like, it's going to be huge. And yes, I'm thinking about all 3 of them now. Yes, I am. But also, there is no way that I can think about what's happening in book 3 at the same time as I'm thinking about what's happening in book 1. I have to do it piece by piece. And especially to go from that massive chaos to even a few pages that are in order, that can be so much for my brain. So I literally go, okay, what is 10 pages of this comic? What do 10 pages look like? They can come from any point. They could be at the end, they could be in the middle, it doesn't matter. They could be the beginning. I actually tend to really enjoy the beginning, because I like, this is a bit chaotic, but you'll see when this next book comes out, like, what I mean. I like to start people in a place that feels like they're just there. They're just there all of a sudden, and they're like, they have to look around and be like, where am I right now? What's going on? Where there are many approaches to beginning something. I am a slightly confrontational person, so I like to just sort of put you there and be like, deal with it. Like, you have to figure out how to navigate this now. So I'll just take 10 pages and be like, okay, how do I want these 10 pages to flow? And I'm going to ask you right now, actually, to try something with me that you could use. If you want to, you could use like either a story of your own that you're working with, but also you could do something super simple, like consider your day or your week. I almost prefer that, because those things in and of themselves feel like maybe it's normal, it's mundane, there's nothing like really big and dramatic going on, except, I mean, if you're me or Abigail or some other people we know, it's actually pretty dramatic day to day. Sorry, Abigail, to talk about you while you were gone. I was just like, well, what is normal really, though, considering who's in the room? But the reason that I like thinking about just a day is that, like, storytelling is not about having the most unique or the most magnificent thing to say. It's just your expression of something and sharing an experience that you want someone else to have. You're just like delivering that experience to the other person. And it's always, always, always just an invitation. And it's always your interpretation is the rule of the day. Like, how someone else interprets the same events doesn't matter. You're telling the story. Unless your story is about the differences in how people interpret events, in which case that's fascinating. Point is, what we're going to do is take our, let's say, our day or our week, whichever one feels a bit more story-like to you at this point, And let's do the 10-page breakdown that I just mentioned. Okay, so what I'm going to have you do, you can actually do this like on paper if you want to, or you can have it be, I don't know, if you have like an iPad or something, you want to just like scribble this stuff out. You could do it in not drawings. You don't have to really draw much of anything, but what I'm doing is I'm going to draw 10 boxes, 10 rectangles to represent those 10 pages. And I'm drawing them just in a line. I'm about to show this to you. 6, 7, drawing 10 boxes, 8, 9, and 10. So I'll hold this up, you get an idea of what I'm doing. It's literally just 10 boxes in a row. This is not like, this page is not meant to be a comic. This is like a planning page. And each of these boxes is a page of the comic that I would be writing at this point and then create later. But I'm looking at every one of these pages in a row so that I can see them all at the same time, and I can see them all on a horizontal plane like that, with space on the page above or below, maybe both. So I'm going to stop talking for just a second, let you put 10 boxes on a page, leave some space around them. And when you have your 10 boxes here, basically, in whatever way you like, you can divide the story of your day or the story of your week. Instead of drawing into these pages, which of course you could, but they're tiny and it's going to be like little thumbnail scribbles. What I would actually do here, because I'm trying to translate this chaos document, which is like just bullet points, scattered sentences, words. Sometimes I just have 2 pages that are just a list of words. So really it's just like anything that comes to mind. So when I'm trying to translate a fully written document like that and bring it to how am I planning a visual comic, I don't want to necessarily scribble into each of these boxes. I just want to put like a note just above the box of what it is, of what is, page 1. If I was thinking about my day to day, where would I start? Would I want to start with waking up? Would I want to start with the first parts of the day where I was actually like moving and active? Is there anything notable? Again, if today as a day is just like boring to you to work with, then go back to the week or choose another day. It's just going to be something that like you lived, so you're very familiar with it. Or if you're like ready with a story in your brain that you're working on, you could try it with that too. 10 pages of whatever story. But just making a little note like right above each page, like, okay, so I think it would be luxurious and lovely to do a whole page of just me like waking up this morning. So I'm putting that as my first one. And then the second one, I'll decide, what is worth noting, what is worth showing in this page. So we're going to do this for the whole 10 pages. If you find that you like run out of steam at page 6 or whatever, that's okay, because a smaller piece for you to work with is always great. I really run into trouble when I go beyond looking at about 10 pages. I can sort of think all the way up to 20 pages if I'm doing a big story and I'm trying to make a chapter, but that's hard. I prefer 10. You have a question, Jen? Yeah.
Yeah, so this is writing above or below the squares what
Yeah.
event is, and then later we're gonna like sketch something, I assume.
We don't actually have to sketch anything. I'll tell you. Yeah.
Okay.
This is what's so weird and interesting about this process. But yeah, I'm just going to make a little note like right above each one of like just the rough idea of what happens in that day. And you can write in your boxes too, Abigail. Yeah, that works. It probably would look nicer, honestly, than what I'm doing here. But this part is not so much about images, which is, this is why I'm like, I've never seen anybody do this before. It's weird, but don't worry. Okay, so I'll just give you a minute to like write through what would happen on each of these pages. And like I said, if you get up to like 5 pages or 6 pages and you're like, I don't want to write any more about this day, just have it be a 6-page thing. That's fine. Oh, Olivia was just asking a question about visual scripting. I've not. Yeah, I'm actually curious to look at that because I know she's teaching a lot of not only comics methodology these days, but just like creativity stuff. And I know she's a wicked smart lady, so I should check that out.
Essentially use a software InDesign and you just do boxes, rough boxes. So it's
Yeah.
not one idea per page, but one idea per box. And then you just write with a little text box and then you can, it allows you to think of your pacing or whatever. So it's a bit like this.
Yeah, yeah. And that sounds like the first step of this. So you could merge them if you wanted to. Like you could, yeah, you could have them be complementing each other. I'm trying to think of, okay. I'm going to leave this really, really loose for the sake of this story that I'm going to walk you guys through. Okay. Okay. Oh God, my day was really weird. As I'm writing it out, I'm like, yeah, this is not a normal day for me. This is a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff that I would have to decide, like, not only what are the moments that I'm sharing, but like, yeah, where do I want to land emotionally? Maybe I don't have something to say in the sense of like some big commentary about the world, but maybe what I want to say is just this was my experience today, and this is the perspective I'm taking on it at this point. I do want to be super clear about that because when I harp on having something to say, I think that whatever you want to share about your experience is that valuable. Like it's that important. It can be the thing that you're like, this is my perspective. I also find it much more interesting when we take our perspective and find a way to tie it to those larger ideas. It doesn't have to be, a big sweeping judgment or criticism or grand statement to be important and to be connected to other people's experiences, because we're all just little humans living days on earth every day. So something like whatever you did today that seems mundane, it can be made very touching and beautiful. It can be made into something that someone finds very relatable, maybe makes them feel less alone. It's like, as much as I will press on know what you're saying, I'm not trying to say you should only make a comic when you have something like totally original and mind-blowing. Like it's not that. It's just clarity is key. I think clarity is really key. So what I did here was, yeah, I made my little notes above the boxes of like, here are the moments that are going to happen in the day. I stopped around here because I started to go, so I could get really detailed about this and take it in like a new direction, but I think actually it would be better if I just stopped earlier and then I had a bit more control over this moment. So this is the part that I will really appreciate your questions for this moment. Like I said, this is something that I have done in my brain and intuitively for a long time. And so it's really a new thing for me to be able to like actually communicate it in a way that it will work and land in other people's minds. So here's what we're going to start with today. We're going to try this. Underneath all of these boxes, I want you to put a little scale essentially down one side. So I basically just have a vertical line and it has a top and it has a bottom. And I think what I want to do with this one is also put like a mark in the middle. And if you wanted, you could extend that middle mark to be like a horizontal axis. So we would have a vertical axis and a horizontal axis, but the horizontal axis comes at the center so that we have basically like a positive space above the horizontal axis and we have a negative space below it. So here's me like vertical line, top and bottom, and then there's this middle line that's going all the way across. Are you with me so far? Clear enough. Good stuff. Okay. So this is where it's a little bit, I think like you will be able to figure out what communicates the most to you for how to label that vertical axis on the left. I decided this time to give you a center line that exists in the middle because I think today, in order to kind of wrap our heads around this idea, it might be best to think of the top part of that axis as like positive emotional excitement and intensity, and the bottom part of the axis as negative emotional intensity, which is to say, I usually teach this where it's simply intensity, whether it's a good emotion or a bad emotion, it's just intensity. But I think this might be a little bit clearer. We'll see. You will hopefully tell me. But basically, once you have this little axis and you can put like a smiley face at the top and a frowny face at the bottom, just to keep like the clarity of like, what are these things? And what we're gonna do is plot a point where each page is gonna hit on this axis for the intensity of their positive or negative emotion. And when I say there, I mean the readers. This is what you're aiming for. So it might not be the emotion that the character is sharing, although often the way a reader has access to an emotion is through a character. It's not just seeing a sad event, it's seeing how sad the event makes the character that brings you in. So it might be both, but the key here is that what I'm trying to access when I draw these points on this graph is, how do I want someone to experience this story page by page? How intense emotionally are we going to start? Does that intensity rise? Does that intensity crash? Is there any big jolt from one big emotion to another big emotion? I want to see it. So I start by plotting these dots. I'm going to do that now for a moment and give you a second to do the same. Another thing that's helpful, because we're just sort of drawing dots. I don't know if I was articulate enough about this point, but basically we're drawing dots on the graph that are directly underneath each of the pages we've drawn so that they coincide. I'm going to show you an example. I think I didn't actually say this well enough earlier, but basically here's my first page, and then here's where the intensity of this story starts. It's like a low dose of negative there, and then it goes down. And that actually means that it's getting more intensely negative as the time goes on, and it goes down and it goes down. And then it shoots up to, actually we're in like a sort of positive range up here. And this next page, it's all corresponding with what page it's underneath. That tells me like where we start, we're starting on this page. And then where we go, that's the next page because it's underneath there, okay? Okay, I see Jen nodding and I'm like, I think we're fine. Also, I wonder if I can make the light a little bit better so you can see me better in here.
I'm nodding because I understand the format that you wanted us to do, but I'm also like kicking myself because I didn't lay it out correctly.
That's totally fine. I mean, it's actually quite quick. You can like start again, or take another piece of paper and lay it on top or something, just to have a visually cohesive version of things.
I mean, basically like my boxes go this way.
Oh yeah.
But I still like referenced each one and plotted like where
that'll work.
the story
Yeah.
is. So
yeah. I like to have them visually connected because that's just it just reinforces more what's going on there. And then I can actually put little drawings into those boxes when or if I do have a visual idea that I want to be there. But really the important thing is, okay, so now we've got these dots going on. I actually, in this particular case, it's important to me that there's a certain like slow descent into the negative emotions at the beginning of the day, but then that partway through the day, it came up and it was a bit more jagged, a bit more being tossed around to like, oh, this is a good thing. Oh, that's a hard thing. That was a good thing again. Like, so I put a couple of different dots underneath some of the pages where I wanted there to be that kind of push and pull of lots of activity going on. So it doesn't have to be like one dot per page. It's really just trying to capture the emotional movement of the story, actually quite separate from what's happening. Because now what we're going to do is connect these dots and make a line, make a wave. So just drawing that out. Take a moment there. This is also an opportunity to add quality to the line if you want to. Like I was talking about the jaggedness at one point. Maybe the jaggedness is even beyond connecting those dots, but I want the line to get like wiggly or spiky or something to communicate an emotional quality that wouldn't otherwise be there. I'm trying not to disappear into darkness because it's getting very dark where I am. I keep stepping up to like adjust a light here. See if I can raise the light over there a little bit. Okay. Okay, so look at your line. I mean, this is mine so far. And what I love about this process is that I can look at this and get a real sense emotionally of like what I'm trying to bring to the reader and whether or not it matches up and feels right. Like I look at this wiggly, I call them wiggly graphs of energy. I look at this wiggly graph of energy and go like, do I really want 3 pages where it just feels like sinking, sinking, sinking and hanging down? Because as a reader, that can be hard. Maybe I want to give someone a hard experience like that, but right here, I feel like I can see it before it's been drawn, before anything has been realized, before I've put down a panel breakdown, before I know what's going to be said. I'm just like, what kind of emotional path am I taking them down? And then when I look at, for example, in this big transition here, where I'm like, okay, I decided to have the 3rd page be like a really big still moment. I actually also did this thing where I made the dot really large because that for me was like a signal, oh, this is going to be a weighted moment. Yes, it's got the same low emotional intensity, like the negative emotional intensity, but visually I want it to look different than the other stuff. It's going to be a big black dot instead of these other little tiny ones. But how am I going to transition from there up into the spike of like, what this was like, oh crap, now I have to go live my day, and kind of trying to like pull up out of that moment. This gentle slope doesn't do it for me. I'm like, nope, I can see this. It's like the gentle slope of like waking up in the morning, and I'll just like explain the story to you. I woke up this morning from a nightmare. So I was already pretty low because it was like, oh geez, I literally woke up thinking that something awful had happened. And then it took me like 10 minutes to be like, no, that wasn't real. That didn't happen. And so I started low, and then I looked at my phone, and of course it's like the horrors of the world are just slammed into my face. And I was like, oh my God, just sunk down. And I'm just in bed. Like there's not a high action. There's no like, I'm not like having a fight with someone on my phone. I'm just waking up in this slow, weird, dark way. And so I did want there to be like a soft, gentle curve here and like the sinking into this moment of just trying to punctuate it. The punctuation for me would probably be like a big page of a single drawing, something with either lots of space or lots of darkness. I might even just do a drawing of like under the covers, like head covered because of pain or something. And then the next moment, how do I bring myself out of that into the day? Well, it was a bit like, oh shit, I have appointments. I actually have to leave. I can't just hide under the covers and cry. But how do I get from there to there? Like this sort of gentle angle up, just that line doesn't look right. And if I want it to be a more dramatic line, I know it's going to have to be more vertical. I might even want to add some like spikes to it. And I can change the line much more easily than trying to think about the story, because really the story just needs to serve what this line is communicating. Like this is the communication. It's this wiggly graph. And so how I say that can come through in the words that are said. It can come through in the page design, like pacing. How many small moments do I show? How much space is between them? Maybe it's just one big moment, like that big black dot there is going to be like a big spread. But I'm just trying to get this across. Like knowing what I'm going to say, it's actually now that I see this on the graph, I'm like, oh, okay, that's how that would play out. And if I don't like the shape of this graph, I'll start changing the shape of the graph. So when I do this in like when I teach this when I'm teaching writing for comics, when I teach it in writing for comics, it's fully like, instead of having just squares on the page, you might want to have Post-its and put them in a line on the wall, because then you'll look at that graph and go, okay, that's the first graph. Maybe take a picture of it, or even just like keep this piece of paper, but start a new one to switch things around. And you can just flip the pages and keep the emotional intensity from each page and watch the graph completely change. So I'll actually just do that. I'm like, why am I not doing it to show you this? I'll just really quickly, I only ended up with 5 pages here. So I'm just going to draw 5 more boxes. And I'm going to be true to what happened on each of those pages and where I placed it on the graph. I'm going to keep that, but I'm going to flip the order here. So for me, I had this very linear version of my day that I was communicating. But what if I just went really nonlinear with it? Because maybe what I wanted to do is start with the hectic intensity of being out in the world and trying to meet my appointments. So I'm going to take like the last 2 or 3 pages and put them at the start now. So yeah, I have one here that says like urgency to leave. And I know, because I'm looking at my graph, I'm like, okay, that was in the positive energy section, and it was sort of like a quarter of the way up the line. Then the next one, I'm in a meeting at the bank. Yeah, and that was like weirdly exciting, but also long and also kind of hard. I just find bankers really weird to talk to. And it was like a little high intensity because it was about me like getting a loan. And so it was really like, I really need this to happen, but I need to act really cool, you know? So I'm putting that there, and I had that line go up a little bit, like the dots for that particular meeting. That's when they start to get jagged. And the last one, because of the bank, I was late for something else. So it was like everything went smoothly at the bank, but then I was behind. And so there's another kind of jagged addition to that energy. And again, I'm putting those dots exactly where they were before, and I'm looking at the line and the quality of it. And remember, I said I was taking the end of my story and then flipping it. So basically, the intense parts of the day of me being out in the world, they happen first, even though they were in the afternoon. And I'm going to put me waking up next and do a little time jump. And the beauty of this is I don't quite yet need to know, like, how is that transition going to happen? Because what I'm looking for is, do I enjoy the energetic and emotional journey? So I'm just like replicating, okay, there's the waking up page, there's the looking at my phone and going lower. Then there's this last one where I have the like the really low moment, the bigger low moment with the big black dot, where I want to have a visual kind of pause there. Now that I've rearranged my pages and I put the dots there, I'm going to connect the dots again, and I'm going to try to, choose how they connect. Oh, one of them I just did totally in the wrong place. That's okay. I'll just make the line correct and then adjust the dot. So now this is the same event, same set of events that I just told you about, but it looks like this. Right? So this is version 1. The day starts slow and low, and there's a hard moment to page 3. And then it goes up and spiky and up and up and up, and stuff is going on. And I haven't figured out the end yet, but that's fine. And the end is me teaching this. So, And then here's version 2, where I'm like, actually, you start in the story and you're in like this action of my day, where like I'm out there and I'm doing stuff and I'm a bit stressy and I'm a bit like, hey, everything's going to be fine. And now I'm late for something and blah. And then I'm going to take you back to this low and super gentle curve going down and down and down into this moment of gravity. Those are 2 totally different feelings of story. The events, same. So when I say, know what you want to say, like, this is how I figure it out. Like, I know all of the events. I know all the little, you know, I know this line that I want these two characters to say together. I know that at this point there's going to be a ton of action, but this whole other point is just a lot of conversation. The graphs, though, in terms of the difference between like a chapter or two chapters that are a lot of just two people talking versus the graph of like the emotional intensity when there's like a chase scene or a fight scene or something, the graphs might actually look like you might not even be able to tell them apart. The graph for the fighting actually might look much more flat because it would be like, oh, this is high intensity, and it stays very high intensity for like 4 pages while a lot of this stuff is going on, and nothing is more important or less important than what happened before. You can really see how that might get boring. And some stories that you even read or watch on a movie or whatever, because this is just stories, this doesn't have to be comics, you can like try to plot an intensity graph for the scenes in whatever thing you're watching. And especially if you're finding yourself like checking out or whatever, the graph might be really flat. And you might be like, yeah, I just have no reason to be invested in this because no one is bringing me down after keeping me up for this long. There's no hope in the horror. There's nothing to change this experience. This is where the meaning comes from, right? Like it's just a day. There's nothing super dramatic or amazing about it. I mean, today, I think what this day could speak to, regardless of the direction that I tell the story in, is it would be a little bit of a document of living with the horrific images and knowledge and the realities that are happening in the world while I'm also out here like trying to survive. I'm also out here like, I really need this loan to work out so that I can pay my bills this month and like keep doing my teaching. And that's a big deal for me emotionally. That's like, that brings all my, anxiety and hope and everything into it. And also all of that happened with this moment this morning of just like, my heart feels torn apart because I've just opened my phone and seen things that I hoped would never happen to any human on earth, and they're happening to people right now. And that is a very like, unfortunately, very common juxtaposition for all of us these days. And I could choose to tell it by bringing you in low and then showing how we just have to kind of jump up out of it and do our lives anyway. Or I could show you like me doing my life and it seems like it's this really normal story. And then after you find out that there's also time in the day where I'm carrying this stuff, where I'm feeling this big thing, where I might be like struggling, where people can't see it. Like you can really shape that story however you want to. I just need the graph to understand, does the next page in the story that I want to tell, does it need to be a higher energy one? Does it need to be lower? Do we want more action because I'm trying to create a sense of like being out of breath, like just the running of like, oh, next thing, next thing, next thing. Is that something I want? Do I want to have people with this little high energy spiky thing for 10 pages? Because there might be something valuable in giving them that experience and then making a change so that it feels quite drastic.
Did you use exercise when you wrote dumb?
In my brain.
But did you thought of it as these valences of
the
tension?
way I would describe it was not so much like seeing a line, but really very much tuning into like, what do I want to feel? Like I want to feel a slow entry here. I want to feel the crushing sense of, trying to exist with voices coming at me all the time. It's not necessarily going to be reflected in the content alongside it exactly, because to me, this energy graph could be showing you the events, like I did show the events going on, but actually in the first 3 pages of this story, there's no action. So I could tell the same story, but just focus on it being very peaceful because it's like me in bed, like it's nothing's happening. But internally, there's this whole other experience that's really intense and it's unseen. And so I would think about it in terms of the feeling is something that you're not seeing, but that I want my reader to feel. So I'm trying to bring them, what's the feeling I'm trying to bring them? And then do I want it to like burst up and be another whole feeling because I'm yanking them in a new direction? Do I want it to be something that they feel like is hitting them in the face? And if they've just been hit in the face, maybe they need a break. That's all like emotional and energetic to me. And then I started to try and teach this to people. And I was like, oh, you could just look at it on a page if you make it a line and a graph. maybe less sexy, but like it's really hard to tell someone just do this in your brain. Like, doesn't really work
Right.
like that.
But so obviously, because I reread them just last week in preparation for this. Uh,
Nice.
you know, you really do master that sort of, and I don't want to call them tropes, but there's certain conventions that have almost become established almost since then, in terms of how do you use a style, like a stylized kind of illustration. There's big color blocks, the scribbles, even this little like allegory of the stars, you know, that sort of accumulate, right? So I'm curious, is your next project, which sounds obviously very different, I mean,
Yeah.
how are you gonna apply all of that, and how is that gonna mesh?
Well, this is what's fascinating, because like I'm really trying to bring you guys into all of this stuff that I've been doing just kind of in here all this time, but it also is just the beginning. Like this is really just the beginning of the process. I can look at like when I have my chaos document and I'm like, okay, it's time to plan a chapter. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to look at this and I'm going to make this graph. I'm like, yeah, you know, I want it to get intense here. I want you to feel these, especially in this new work, because it's a horror work. So it'll hit you with like fear. Like the fear has to come in very interesting sort of beats of like timing and stuff. And that to me, the experience of fear is so much the point of horror. And then what that fear does to you and where it can go, that's actually going to be more something that I explore after this like wiggly graph business is done. Then I go, okay, now I need to figure out like moment by moment, page by page, what's happening. And I'll go back to the chaos document to like grab the details, like grab all the interesting pieces that could be matched together. You were talking about like having a little allegory of something, or having like, you know, when should there be like the chaos of scribbles versus like something that's laid out more clearly. So my chaos document does not just have plot points. It does not just have the story in terms of like this character and what this character wants and what this character has happened to them. My chaos document also includes, like I mentioned earlier, like just a 2-page list of words, because those words all carry something of like the flavor of what I'm trying to say, or like an image in what I'm trying to say. And there's also a section of that document for form. So I think last time I did talk about how personally, I will only make a story into a comic if I think the comicness of it is very important. That same story would not be good as a song. It would not be good as a novel. It would not be good as a painting. It needs to be a comic for a reason. And for me, the reasons come through form. That like, is there something that I can do in the form of comics that is going to be, I was going to say really interesting, and that is true, but for me, really interesting almost invariably means really, really hard to do. So
Is it going to be recognizably your style, or because you're changing genres, they're going to kind of change? Right. Okay.
No, I truly believe that when people look at this, like if they'd read Dumb and then they picked this up, they would not know that it was me. Probably. Which is fun. That's super, super fun. But also at the same time, like I'm never going to escape my style of storytelling. Like I think once you read it, you will be like, hell yeah, this is how Georgia tells stories, like that, of course. But that's coming from here. Like the aesthetic choices, and especially actually that's also a true thing. Form is not just for me about wielding like page design, because that is one of our pieces of craft, but it's also literally like, am I drawing this with the same, like, am I going to use markers like I did before? Am I going to use color? Am I going to make this still sort of like stripped down line art, or is this going to be something different? Why? But also, like when I say like I know what I'm going to say, the answer to all those questions, like I have an answer to why. Why does it look like this? Why is it in pencil this time? Why is it like that? Like I know, because I've looked at everything about the story that feels like it feeds the tone and it feeds the experience I want you to have, stuff that's going to be fun for me. Like that's all going to come in after and through this little like felt part with the, I know it's so funny because I talk about this as being like so emotional and it's such a like intuitive thing, but then I get you to draw a graph like it's math class. Like it's not, you know.
Really resisted drawing any pages or any sketches. It's all a felt process today. Seems hard to believe.
That's how I did Dumb. Yeah, I didn't do pencils at all. I just like dove in. I mean, from here, like from a graph like this, which I didn't do before, I just did in my brain. From a graph like this, then I would be filling in like each of these boxes for a page would have little scribbles of like, oh, I think there's going to be, you know, a lot of the 3x3 panels at the top, and there's going to be really open space at the bottom. And I can scribble that in pretty easily. And then from there, it's just translating, okay, that's the, like for me, that's communicating that at the top of the page, we have some normalcy, we have some structure because they're three rectangles that are the same size, and they sort of follow a pattern that you'll look at and you recognize it and you get it. But the bottom half of the page has to have no structure because I'm trying to show you a contrast. Like that's the kind of thing that when I scribble into a box here, I can capture that, even though the drawings themselves are like nothing. And like I'm saying I just because like this is a process workshop about how I do things, but I'm also very much like anyone can do anything that looks messy and crazy. It can become something very interesting. These days, I'm more interested in pencils. I'm more interested in designing the longer project before it all gets made. And like I said, like the new project, I'll give you a I'm like, how can I share an image from the new project so that you can have a sense of how different it is? Yeah, I'll just have to share my screen with you and open up Procreate. I'll show you.
Right. Wow, sneak peek.
Yeah, why not? Oops, I think I might have stopped it. No, it is good now. Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. Here's my Procreate. Okay, this is it. Let's just look at like this is a page from the story. Which like, if we contrast that with dumb, it's just not the same. You know, like this story is so much about like texture and things that are felt, and dumb was just like say the thing and move on.
I mean, you have 10 years more experience too, right?
Yeah, and I'm also just, you know, this is what I haven't done before, which is why it's more interesting.
Yeah, the page is a lot more full.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I used to get comments that I didn't have backgrounds. So I'm like, check it out.
The whole page is the background.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm specifically like right now and probably through the project not using panels, no panel borders, and that's because that sounds hard. But also it suits the story. It really suits the story to have things not have hard edges, to have there not be a strong separation between one moment and another. That serves the story that I'm telling, which is how that decision got made. And then it becomes the challenge of, okay, how do I execute all of these crazy decisions that I've made?
Are you thinking minimal, like, is there going to be a lot of silent panels like this throughout, or is it going to be, how do you weigh that?
Yeah, honestly, it comes from something like this, but also what I'm trying to say with this new story is a lot more, I mean, it's coming from experience, yes, because I think that's what we're all doing when we write fiction, is like processing and saying a lot of what if and how would that work. And so there's graphs behind all of it for sure. But with my like larger ideas, I think last time maybe I even came up with a phrase for it, but today I was talking about like central subjects. Like a central subject of this story is how human beings are animals. And so how do animals experience the world? They don't have words. So that's relevant to me choosing to have some silence and moments where it's about like instinct and feeling, because we're looking at the animal side of being human and how we interact with other animals. And also monsters, which is a whole other like, does language exist with monsters? I don't fucking know. Like we got to figure that out. I'm gonna jump into it. I'm gonna see what I could do with that. So it depends on the story, and it also depends on if I feel like there's been a lot of writing, then I'm absolutely gonna want a pause. I'm gonna want something slow. I'm gonna want to just like silence to reset or to change the mood. Maybe changing between scenes. That could be it. There'll be one scene where there's like a long conversation happening. I definitely don't want to throw more words at you right after that when we switch to a new environment. I want to give the brain some space.
It looks very nice. It's not at all what I imagined when you kind of gave me as a synopsis last time. You might help further the genre because there's a lot of very middle, like not quite middle grade, but there's a sort of a kind of horror comic that is definitely not that. So I'm really impressed.
Yeah, horror is often really campy, and that's
Right.
really fun. And I want this to be fun, but it's also I'm like I said this the other day to Abigail, like I've been called severe on more than one occasion. Like I'm not gonna be that campy. I take things pretty seriously. But it's also fun. It's also fun to be like, let's not just tell things how they are literally, but let's like expand on that. That's what's made this interesting to me. And it's also like, the art that I made for my previous two books was actually a departure from this style that I'm using now, which I used to do like in high school as a sort of like just a calming activity, was to like try to draw photorealistically, and then trying to find, well, how can I like deviate from photorealism to make it a bit more like energetic or a bit more alive than just, I'm not trying to take a photograph with my pencil. Like I'm trying to do something else. So interestingly, like I know that people will probably look at this as like a new direction for me, and it absolutely is. I mean, I've learned so much, but it's also a return to something that I'm actually much more used to doing, and I had just never applied to a comic before. So yeah, I mean, I think I maybe mentioned this before, but this is one of my struggles being someone who teaches a lot and like mentors a lot. I can never remember what class did I say this thing to, but it's important to say, and I want that to be on this recording, that like I lost my train of thought. Oh my God, it was right there. Like, who did I say this to before? Oh, here we go. This is it. Another piece to how I make the decisions of like what story to tell, and especially like what are these sort of feelings that I'm trying to communicate, is that I know when I see this graph, I'm like, when I'm drawing this stuff, this is the journey I'm on. Like, as the person drawing it, I will have this low day when I'm trying to communicate this low day. Hopefully, if I do it with some distance, then that perspective will make it feel like, I'm revisiting that time as opposed to being dropped right into it and stuck there. If I have a bit of distance from it, I can go back almost more as an observer, but I'm still going to feel it. And like, this is an example of just my day to day doing something like having a nightmare and then opening my phone and seeing awful things. But the stuff that I'm writing about in this next story is like early traumas in my life and someone else's, and like really intense adult experiences that mirror and touch upon that. And so I've been working on this comic for a long time now, like over 2 years, just in my brain box and on the chaos document. But there are some parts of it that it's like, if I'm going to work on that, I need to be like completely ready to give myself tons of space around starting to write about it and then maybe stopping so that I can have the feelings I need to have and process them. And I choose that actually because that's what I'm ready for. And drawing in this way is also something I feel ready for. When I was younger and I was making dumb, it was really like, I got to be brave. So I'm going to make it bold and simple. I got to get this done, even though I'm scared. That's like all I was doing for that whole book, was just get it out, get it out. You're terrified, get it out anyway. And at this point, I'm like, I want to enjoy this. And also, some of this is going to be like, processing my life in a way that's very important for me to do. And I think this art and making it beautiful can really hold me and make it feel worth doing, and not just like I'm torturing myself alone in the woods, I'm actually enjoying the like lush art creation, and I'm giving myself time to spend on like drawing lots of trees, because looking at trees feels really good. And while I'm sad, that could really help me get through the sad parts. That could be a resource for me to live my life the way that I want to. So it's another piece of when I'm deciding to make a comic, it's like, do I want to spend time in that world? Is there something for me to learn and work with in myself while I'm also working with it on the page? That's where the value is coming from for me at this point. because I just don't have anything to prove. Like I did with Dumb, I was really like, I need to show people I'm a comics artist and I've got to just get it out there, and it's imperfect and it's crazy, but like go. And now I'm like, well, I did that. That's great. I'm sure I could do that again. I'd like it to be less hectic. I'd like to feel less pressure. And so with this one, I'm really choosing to not have pressure and choosing to come at it more for my own like enjoyment. And that's informing the style. That's informing, it's informing the story.
Self-imposed deadline or pace that you're trying to meet?
Yeah, I've got ideas and I'm working with that. I mean, 2 years ago when I started thinking about this, I was like, oh, I'll have it out by June next year. And that was like 8 months away from when I'd started. And like, nope, I was not ready for that. Not even a little. But I was excited. So it was cool to have that happen. And then it was part of the process to like let that deadline go and just like put it away for a minute and then come back to it. And I'm happy I did. I feel like the timing of this moment is correct. Like I am so much stronger and so much more ready to do this from the position I start right now. But also now that I have been sitting on it for 2 years, I'm like, okay, let's get this shit out there. I'm currently, coordinating with my agent as well, because this is the kind of job, this is the kind of book that it is going to take me like a few years to get it done. And I simply won't be able to do that with like a very small advance from a publisher who's not prepared to take it on. I actually need to like get someone on board who can pour a ton of energy into this, but also give me some money to make sure that I'm like survive this happens and I'm not having to put the book on hold because money is too tight. Like I really want to just do this. I really want to just make this my life for a little while. So those are the kind of deadlines that are now kind of coming up. They're not deadlines like you better get it done or else it never happens. It's more like this deadline will help us to sell the book so that you can do it. Like
Right.
this is a more supportive series of deadlines. And having my agent and having the people who I teach and like mentor all there as like supportive figures is also a freaking game changer. I started mentoring people specifically because I was like, this is what I needed like 10 years ago. I needed this and it wasn't there. And I pushed so hard and I hurt myself because I was just so stressed while I was trying to make things happen. And now I'm here with all of these younger comics artists who are like, I'm doing this and this is so stressful. And I'm like, yeah, and we're going to help make it easier. Like, let's talk about that stress. Let's like look at those pages for you. Let's go through this process, not alone and under pressure, but together and with tons of support. And I'm getting supported by them, even though I'm there trying to hold them in their projects. So it's really like the whole thing is much more pleasurable. It means the deadlines are less scary because I'm not feeling under pressure. I'm feeling excited to meet them. I'm like, yeah, let's do this. Like,
Is that the year-long graphic novel thing with Saw?
Oh no, that's separate. They hire me to mentor separately from my personal mentoring work. Like I have my teaching work is under the name Drawing the Inside Out, and then I have this slow burn mentorship group that I do for people who have long form comics projects, and that's like on a yearly basis. So we have the 2024 cohort, and then we'll like finish that out and bring new people in for 2025. Because this shit takes forever. Like a year of mentorship and support is a fraction of your project. So that's why it's got to be like, you come in for like a commitment, because it just is so much work and people go through revolutions of their own personal practice to like find what actually works for them and not be so bound to whatever idea in their head they have about like a perfect comics artist or a more worthy or deserving comics artist, what they might do. It takes time to undo that shit and be like, but what am I? Like, who am I? What do I actually like? What works for me, even if it's totally different than what's out there. Yeah. Cool. It's all slow. It's all slow. Which is why I'm also like, if it's going to take me like 5 to 7 years to get this thing finished, I want to enjoy the next 5 to 7 years of my life. Yeah.
I have a question for you. When you were writing Dumb, were you without a voice while you were writing it, or were you looking back at a time when your voice?
Oh, it was happening. Yeah.
It was happening. Okay.
Yeah. I started the like chapters 1 and 2. I drew them like within a couple weeks. I mean, literally like 2 or 3 weeks of getting the instruction of like, hey, you need to stop talking for a while. That I was just like, oh my God, this is so insane. Oh my God, I better write it down. Better make this comic. It was very same time at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's possible. I'm like, I talked about perspective before with like, if I'm going to have a hard time drawing about the day I had today, that it can really help for it to be like, oh, that was a few days ago, so I'm not kind of living in it. But there are other times when drawing something while it's happening is exactly how to capture what it feels like and maybe even take it out of your body a little bit for me. Some of those pages were drawn like that, and you could probably tell which ones they are. Yeah, there's a lot of stress with that book, but it was the stress of all the shit in my head. Yeah. Yeah. Are there any more questions? I want to wrap up soon because I said this would be an hour and I don't want to take too much more of anyone's time. Not to mention it's later here for me than it is for most people, so it's like bedtime soon. But I'd love to take another question if you guys have anything else. No, feeling good. Cool. Well, thank you. Like I said, this graph situation, I'm still trying to find ways to articulate it to capture more of what's possible in the experience that you're communicating to your reader. Because this is at the end of the day, this is still quite simplified. Like you can have lots of weird little nuances and stuff within a wiggly graph. But I never want to bring in something that feels so complicated when you're trying it that it's hard to do. I want you to like grasp it and then you can complicate it. So I'm still working on that. If you have any thoughts about that, you can like shoot me an email back from where you got the Zoom link today. I'd be happy to get the feedback.
I really like the idea of the chaos document. I think I might start that.
Oh, it's good.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, I don't have to remember anything anymore. It's all there. I just dump it. It's a little dumping ground.
Yeah.
Or it's like how in my car, the footwell of the passenger seat is where I throw all my garbage while I'm driving. I'm like, that's the chaos document. Is like any like I'm having a drink or I'm, eating food, or I'll bring my mug of tea from the house into the car. And then I have to like finish it because it's an open top. But once it's not got any water or any tea in it anymore, then it goes into the footwell. And then in a month, I'll go through the footwell like, oh, there's a few mugs. There's all the trash that I have to throw out, organize it all. And we're back to square one and it's good. It's not a perfect system, but I need things like that because I can get so controlling and I need different places to just say, hey, it's okay. Be a mess. Be a mess. Creativity is a great place to be a mess.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Let's end here so that we have an hour-ish of this workshop. And like I said, this is kind of just the beginning, so there might be more stuff. But also, if you're curious, like actually how I'm working on the current project, on the YouTube channel that I use for all my teachings, I'm also putting just little like 10-minute videos there of me literally like, okay, here's where I'm at with this today. Like, this is the part that I'm working on. This is where I'm struggling. It's like a vlog for my comics making process. So you can always pop those. They're just a bit more slow and they're a bit more like, this is what I'm thinking about, instead of like, this is the thing you do step by step. Yeah. But those are there.
Checking that out.
Cool. Okay. Well, yeah. Have a great night. Thanks again for being here, and I'll let you know when there's another one.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye for now. Bye.